Hello, and welcome back to Notes Due at Midnight. If you're new here, my name is Casey Openshaw Haycock. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, a business owner, a mom, and apparently someone who processes most of life's chaos by talking about it into a microphone. I started this podcast because there are a lot of conversations that happen behind the therapy notes. The things we don't necessarily learn in school, the things parents don't always say out loud, and honestly, the things therapists don't always say out loud either. We talk about parenting, pediatric therapy, running a business, motherhood, and sometimes just trying to keep everything afloat and pretending we know what we're doing. And today's episode is a little heavier than usual. Normally, there's a lot of sarcasm involved. So, trigger warning. Before I start, I want to give you a very clear content warning. Today's episode discusses the Lindsay Clancy case, the deaths of the children, suicide, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and parental mental health crises. If any of those topics are difficult for you, please skip this episode. I have plenty of other great ones. And seriously, this one will be here another day. But before I get into this, I also need to say something very clearly. I was not involved in Lindsay Clancy's care. I don't know what was happening inside her mind. I do not diagnose, and I'm not here to tell you whether she was or was not criminally responsible for the deaths of her children. That's for the court to decide. I'm talking about this today because watching this case unfold has made me think differently about motherhood, mental health, occupational therapy, my own postpartum experience, and even something that I created and teach to other parents. And I think I may have gotten part of it backwards. So this episode is going to be a little different. Before anything else, their names. If you've been online lately, you've probably seen something about the Lindsay Clancy trial. There are courtroom clips everywhere. People are debating the evidence. People have very strong opinions about whether she knew what she was doing, whether she was psychotic, what medication she was taking, what her husband knew, and what her providers knew. And like everything on the internet, people have divided themselves into two separate teams. But before Lindsay Clancy's name is mentioned another 100 times, I want to say three other names. Cora, Dawson, Callan. Three little kids. Three children who should still be here. Whatever conversations come out of this case, I don't ever want those children to become secondary characters in their own story. I don't think talking about maternal mental health takes anything away from them. I actually think we have to be able to hold both things. We can say what happened to those children is horrific, and we can also have a serious conversation about what happens when a mother is mentally unwell. Those things don't cancel each other out. There is one word connected to this case that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, and that is drowning. And maybe it's because I'm an occupational therapist, or maybe it's because I'm a mom. Probably both. But when I hear someone describing themselves as drowning, my brain immediately goes to capacity, because there's a difference between swimming and surviving. There's a difference between doing something successfully and using every ounce of energy you have just to get through it. And one of the biggest things occupational therapy has taught me is this. Functioning does not necessarily mean that someone is okay. Someone can get dressed, go to work, make dinner, answer emails, take their children to appointments, smile at you, post pictures on Facebook, remember the permission slip, and still be barely keeping their head above water. As an OT, I'm interested in whether you can perform the occupation, but I'm also interested in what is it costing you to perform it? And in this case, it has made me think about the question in a very personal way, because I've drowned before too. Not in the same way, not with the same diagnosis, not with the same outcome, but I know what it feels like to be a mother and look around at your life and think, how did I get here? So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my postpartum story. I don't think I've ever really talked about it this in depth on the podcast, or really many places. But after I had Theo, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. And my postpartum experience wasn't the beautiful version you see in pictures. It wasn't matching pajamas and newborn photos and me peacefully drinking coffee while the baby slept. My life was falling apart at the same time I was supposed to be experiencing one of the happiest moments of my life. I was in a bad situation. At about 6 weeks postpartum, I moved 70 miles away from Theo's dad, and I ended up in a town where I essentially knew no one. I was in Colorado Springs, and Theo's dad lived in Denver. I moved into my now friend Sarah's house. I call her my now friend because when I moved into her house, I had met her one time. And even saying that now makes me feel emotional. Because sometimes when we talk about a support system, it sounds so formal, like you need this giant village. Parents, grandparents, friends, neighbors, people bringing casserole, some perfectly organized group of people just ready to step in. And I didn't have that. But I had Sarah, and I had our friend Jen, who ended up moving in with us as well. And sometimes your village is just one or two people. Sometimes your support system is literally somebody opening their door to you and saying, you can stay here. And at that point in my life, that mattered more than I probably knew how to say. I still don't know what to say. At the same time, I was stuck waiting on the Colorado court system. And that feeling of waiting is hard to explain unless you've lived through it, where somebody else has control over what happens next in your life. I couldn't just say, okay, this isn't working. Theo and I are going home and pack up everything and move back to Maine. There was a court process. There were decisions that weren't mine to make alone. So I waited. In a town where I didn't know anyone, living in a friend's house, with a baby, 3 cats, and 6 dogs, with postpartum depression, trying to figure out what my life was going to look like. And while all this was happening, my parents were actively going through a divorce. So the family I had always known was changing at the same exact time I was trying to figure out what my own little family was going to be. And when I list it now, years later, I almost want to reach back through time and hug that version of myself because she was carrying a lot. But motherhood doesn't pause. So here's the thing. None of that stopped Theo from needing me. There wasn't a button that I could push that said, Casey's life is currently falling apart. Please pause motherhood for the next 48 hours. He still woke up from his naps. He still needed to eat. He still needed diaper changes. He still cried. He still needed comfort. He still needed his mom, and I was his mom. So I kept going because that's what parents do. And I love him. God, I love him so much. And at the time, that's what kept me going, right? But I need people to understand that those two things can exist in the exact same body at the exact same time. You can love your child more than anything in the world, and you can still be struggling. You can be grateful that they're yours and still desperately want an hour where no one touches you or needs anything. And you can look at your baby and think they're the greatest thing that ever happened to you, and then start crying because you don't recognize yourself anymore. You can be a good mom and need help. Those things aren't opposites. I think about that version of myself, 29 years old, a new mom, living in someone else's home, away from almost everyone I knew, waiting for a court system to decide what I could do next. My parents' marriage ending, trying to figure out how I was going to build a life for this tiny person who depended completely on me, and dealing with postpartum depression at the same time. Today, I can look back at her with so much more compassion than I had for her then. Because back then, I thought I was supposed to handle it. I thought being a good mom meant figuring it out, getting up, taking care of Theo, doing what needed to be done, moving forward, and I did. But now, with everything I know about regulation and mental health, I look back and think, of course you were struggling. Look at what you were carrying. And that's something I wish we would say to parents more often. A lot of times they get, other people have it worse, or at least you have a healthy baby, or enjoy every minute, it's going to go by fast, or soak it all in. But wouldn't it be nice if somebody just said, that's a lot for one person to carry? And I need to stop here and make an important distinction. I had postpartum depression, and my experience is not the same as postpartum psychosis. My story does not give some special ability to know what Lindsay Clancy was thinking. It doesn't. I'm not comparing our experiences, and self-care is not a treatment for psychosis. A bubble bath isn't psychiatric care. Going for a walk isn't psychiatric care. And a weighted blanket isn't psychiatric care. They all are coping strategies, but sometimes someone needs urgent, specialized professional intervention. And I actually think we do mothers a disservice when every mental health conversation gets reduced to, make sure you're taking time for yourself. Because sometimes what a person is experiencing is much bigger than just self-care. My experience taught me something else. Context matters, and support matters, and we need to notice people before they're completely underwater. This is where the OT part of my brain kicks in, because I spend my entire career looking underneath children behavior. A kid comes into my clinic screaming, refusing, hitting, running away, hiding under tables, maybe biting. And I'm not supposed to look at that child and say, wow, what a bad kid. I'm supposed to ask questions like, did they sleep? Did they eat? Are they overstimulated? Are they anxious? Is it too loud in here? Are my demands too high? Do they understand what I'm asking them to do? Are they dysregulated? Do they actually have the skill we're asking them to use? And most importantly, what is this behavior communicating? Behavior is communication. But then adults become parents and suddenly we stop asking what's underneath their behavior. They're just supposed to handle it. Especially moms. The list of things mothers are supposed to do is almost comical. Recover from childbirth, care for a newborn, don't forget tummy time, track the feeding schedule. How many diaper changes did they have? Oh, gotta have appointments. Go take care of your other kids. Keep the house clean, do the laundry, put it away, maintain your relationship, and eventually go back to work. And then they start school and you have to remember picture day, you have to read to the kids, make sure they're not using their screens too much, make sure they're eating healthy dinners, set boundaries, but don't be too strict, be gentle, but don't let them run the house, give them independence, but keep them safe. And don't forget to enjoy every second because they're only little once. Great. No pressure. And then a mom will say, I can't do this anymore. And sometimes we respond, I know, motherhood is hard. I've been guilty of that. But maybe we need to stop there. And maybe instead of immediately normalizing it, we ask, what do you mean when you say you can't do this anymore? Because maybe she's tired. Maybe she needs someone to take the baby for an afternoon. Or maybe something is seriously wrong. We don't know unless we ask. And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask. And as I was watching this case, I thought about the COPEN program. And something hit me. I created COPEN. If you don't know, it's my parenting program. I teach parents about behavior and regulation, sensory processing, routine, and co-regulation. And the last letter, the N, stands for nurture. Nurturing yourself, parent self-care, recognizing your own needs, taking care of your own regulation. And then suddenly I thought, why in the hell did I put that last? Alphabetically, because it's part of my name, has to stay there. Can't be the Notebook program. Has to be the COPEN program. I'm not changing the acronym. I already have made the materials. We're committed. But philosophically, I think I've had it backwards. Nurture needs to come first. Who regulates the regulator? Think about what I ask parents to do as an OT. Stay calm during the meltdown. Co-regulate. Hold the boundary. Follow through. Use a visual schedule if they need one. Practice the strategy. Keep your routine consistent. Model appropriate emotional regulation. Do the sensory activities. Give choices. Use positive reinforcement. And then maybe I hand you a home program maybe laminated, might have Velcro, because obviously those things are going to solve the world. But I've been thinking, who is regulating the person I'm asking to regulate the child? Because I know what it feels like to have nothing left. And we would never look at a completely overwhelmed 5-year-old and say, you know what this kid needs? More demands. We modify something. We decrease the demand, change the environment, offer support, teach them a skill. But when a parent is overwhelmed, we hand them another worksheet. Maybe I need to ask a different question first. Do you have the capacity to do what I'm asking you to? Sarah and Jen were my nurturers. And here's what I've realized while thinking about my own postpartum story. When I was living through it, nurture didn't look like self-care. It looked like a shower while Theo was in his bassinet right next to me. It looked like somebody giving me somewhere safe to land. It looked like someone making room for me when my life didn't have a clear place to go. And Sarah was so nice. She let me and Theo sleep in her bedroom for a while. That's nurture. And I think that's an important distinction because sometimes you cannot have self-care enough to get out of your circumstances. Sometimes you need another human being, and sometimes someone else has to nurture you. Someone has to say, I've got the baby, go to sleep, or you're staying here tonight, or I'll make dinner, or simply, you don't have to do this by yourself. That's a village. It doesn't always take 20 people. Sometimes it takes one, and I'll never forget mine. And here's probably the most OT thing I'm going to say today. The caregiver is part of the child's environment. An environment affects occupational performance. We talk about the lighting, the noise, sensory input, schedules, classroom setup, transitions, but the emotional environment matters too. And the person responsible for maintaining that environment has a nervous system of their own. They have sensory needs, executive functioning demands, sleep needs, emotional needs, occupations outside of parenting. So maybe when we're treating a child, one of our first questions should be, how's the family functioning? And maybe even a simpler one, how are you? And not the polite version, not the one where they always say, good, and you? Actually, how are you? I don't know what the Lindsay Clancy jury will ultimately decide. I'm not going to tell you what they should decide. 3 children died. Cora, Dawson, Callan. Their lives matter. I think we can honor them without pretending serious maternal mental illness doesn't exist. Compassion doesn't require us to decide someone's guilt. We can protect children. We can grieve children. And we can also decide that we're going to take parenting seriously when they tell us they're struggling. Because I don't want us to care about maternal mental health only after something catastrophic happens. I want us to care about the baby that is 6 weeks old and mom says, I don't feel like myself. I want us to care when she stops sleeping, when she's scared, when she says something doesn't feel right, and when dad will say, she seems different. When someone says, I'm drowning, maybe instead of reassuring them that everyone feels overwhelmed, we ask, how far underwater are you? And maybe this is the sentimental part. If I could go back and sit beside that version of myself in Sarah's house, the version of me holding baby Theo, waiting on court, wondering where we were going to live, watching my parents' marriage end, trying to figure out how I was going to build a life when I didn't even recognize the one that I had been living, I don't think I'd give her advice. I wouldn't give her a sensory strategy, and I wouldn't give her a worksheet. I think I'd just sit beside her and tell her, you're going to be okay. Not because you need to try harder, not because you're going to magically become better at handling everything, but because eventually you're going to build a life that right now you can't even picture. And that little baby you're holding, he's going to grow into this funny, wild, video game loving kid who makes you laugh constantly and occasionally makes you question every parenting strategy you've ever taught another human. And you're going to be okay. But right now, you don't have to pretend that this isn't hard. You don't have to be grateful for every second. You don't have to prove that you're strong enough to do it alone. Let others help you. Let people love you. Let people carry things. Because needing to be nurtured doesn't make you less capable of nurturing your child. Maybe it actually makes it possible. So I'm changing something. The N in COPEN will technically stay last. Again, I'm not rebranding it. But when I teach it, nurture will come first. Before I ask you to regulate your child, I want to know how regulated you are. Before I give you another strategy, I want to know what you're already carrying. Before I tell you what you should add to your routine, maybe we need to figure out what we can take away. Before I ask, what does this child need? What does the person taking care of this child need? Because parents aren't just part of the treatment plan. They're people, and people need care too. If you're listening to this while you're hiding in the bathroom because it's the only place your kids will give you 30 seconds alone, I see you. If you're listening while driving to another appointment, making dinner, folding laundry, pumping, working, or sitting in your car for 5 extra minutes before you go inside, I see you. And if you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, but quietly thinking, I don't think I'm okay, please tell somebody. Not because you're failing, because you matter too. You don't have to wait until you're underwater to deserve someone reaching out a hand. I'm Casey Openshaw. This is Notes Due at Midnight. And apparently it took me creating an entire parenting program to realize that I put the parent at the end. So we're fixing that. Nurture comes first. Take care of the kids. Take care of the people raising the kids. Take care of each other. And maybe this week, check on the person who seems like they always have everything handled. Sometimes they're the ones working the hardest just to stay above water. I'll see you next week.